tonight. So welcome to anybody that's over on YouTube or on my Google Plus account. We're just kind of getting things rolling here tonight for the INE Networks gathering. We had a webinar last night on upscale marketing, and then we do a laboratory get-together the night after and discuss what we presented last night. And we've still got some of our members trying to solve their computer problems and get themselves in here with us, but I got a funny mic from somebody. One of you guys' mics is really, the amplitude is really high. There. Nope, nope.
No? Whose is it?
Whose is it? I can't figure out. Somebody's got amps way up. It is you, Ed. That's good. Okay, thank you. Good. All right, Diane's back. And can't seem to get Tamarie in. Lance keeps trying. Technology is interesting. We've wrestled with this. We've been having our webinars now for 8 years. We get together every Wednesday night, and then we started getting together Thursday night too, and having sessions with our circle of relationships. We've been pals and friends for a long time. We're part of a group we call the INE for Inspiration and Encouragement Network, and we'll come out of a database from a company called Profitable Hobbies that's been selling a package for teach people how to take a hobby and turn it into a business for 30 years. 30 years. So welcome tonight for all of you that are here. I'd like to introduce, we have a special guest on. She's back on again tonight and struggling with trying to get everything set up, is Diane Ham. Diane's been a member for a long time. She's in Maine, and Diane struggles with her vision. She has vision disability, has been legally blind for a long time, and Diane does some amazing carvings and engraving and artwork. She's a Native American artist extraordinaire, and if you ever get the chance, go back and see that demo video that Tam has up on the front end of the Profitable Hobbies website. Is Diane's featured in that video, and she came out and was part of our preparing of that individual selling video. And it's been fun. I've met Diane on trade shows and worked with her and kind of enjoyed her spirit and her contribution for a long time. So welcome tonight, Diane. She's finally getting ahead of the technology and going to come and play with us on the internet more often. Welcome to all the rest of you. Appreciate your taking your time, your valuable time, and come and sit down and mix with us. And I wanted to start out tonight with just a little bit of what happened in my life today. I had a very, very unique day. Jack has my #1 patron and has become my best friend. Has a very large collection of handmade artwork and all kinds of beautiful things that he's collected. He was the inventor of the electronic poker machine in Las Vegas years ago, and became fabulously wealthy with that innovation. And then he's been very shrewd in business. He's taken 29 companies public in his career, and I've known Jack now for 35 years. I did a gun for him, carved a gun stock early on, and that just lit up our relationship, and we've kind of gone on from there. He's trying to find a place and a way to put his collection now somewhere permanent and have it now visible. He's kept it quiet to himself. It's in his homes for all these years, and he didn't want anybody to know what he had. He kind of kept it away from the public, and now it's time to put it somewhere and turn it loose on the marketplace. The dominant centerpiece of his collection is hand engraved crystal. He has some unbelievable pieces of cut glass. They're both brilliant cut glass as well as hand engraved art pieces. And my conservative estimate that he's got about $12 million worth of artistic glass in his life. But that's just the start. That's just where things begin. And so we met today with the director of a local museum, Dr. Wright, and she came and participated. And then the mayor of Salt Lake City is Ralph Becker, and he had his artistic liaison lady come, and she's also tied into the University of Utah. And so she came, but she brought Mayor Becker's wife, Kay, with her, and that was quite a surprise. She's just a charming woman, and you turn these women loose with an artistic collection of stuff like Jackass, and it's just quite a show. It was really, we call it the tour when we take people through and let them see the exhibit of his work, and it was just such a grand experience, and everyone's beginning to get the vision of what is about to be put in front of the state of Utah. We're trying to put it on to pretty much reflect Salt Lake City and have it become one of the major museums in the country. So we'll see how that all rolls. But oh, what a grand time it was for me today. The part I wanted to bring up was how that fits with upscale marketing. In presenting what I did last night, there's 5 stages here now that I'm going to share with you of how you approach the marketplace. And I don't know if you remember the slide I had about a business card. And a business card is advertising, and marketing is who you give it to. And all of those things are what you do. They're how you control your own future in the marketplace, your own destiny. So if you look at how you might present yourself better, and where you drop it in the marketplace is the economy. I spent all evening trying to show you the powerhouse that exists under people that are wealthy. They have, it's just such a unique category in our economy. It's been there since feudal days, since the Renaissance, and it's always been that a certain few owned and controlled most of the world. And it's not changed a lot. It's still, some make gazillion dollars, and then the rest of us live on whatever we can manage to eke out, I guess is the way to put it. I look at a kid like, 2 kids like Larry Page and Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook and Google, and they're worth billions of dollars. And they're kids still. They're just young, really young, and I know they don't like to be called that, but it's the truth. They've got a lot of living yet to live. But that particular segment, 10% of the economy, controls 70% of the nation's wealth. It's just so slanted and so skewed that it's hard to not realize that that's then the fishing hole. If fishing is marketing, your efforts to target your efforts and fish in a different fishing hole. Fish where the big fish are. Remember the grizzly bears sitting on the edge of the water stream and they're fishing together? They're sitting right there where the salmon have to come. There's no way for them to get up that river any other way. And those bears have learned that, you know what, this is a pretty good spot to fish. They're smart enough to know that that's right where the big fish are, so guess what? Put your mouth out right where they're likely to most be. Now that's a very simplified version of my show last night, but it's really what we're talking about. And it amazes me how most artists can't quite figure that out. And I lucked out right early. I started selling my eggs in Park City because my dental practice was right in the middle of it. So here's Vernal, and over here's Aspen, and up here's Jackson Hole, and over here is Park City. So that's where I started selling my carvings. And And even my first show, I did pretty well. I did $3,400 in sales in a 2-day art show in Park City at the Park City Art Show in the fall. And just freaked me out. I just couldn't get over that you could make that kind of money and play, because I had fun at it. As a dentist, I had to hurt people to make that kind of money, and that just was miserable. I got to tell my story again to these women that came to see Jack's collection, and all of them have the attitude that being a dentist is just a cakewalk. You just make tons of money and show up and go home and put the money in the bank. And there's very few jobs in the world that make a decent living that don't have a side to them that are not all that much fun. But I was so captured by the idea that I could make really decent money. I sold at a little gift shop in Park City called Family Jewels. It was Dick Doty's shop, and he was a custom goldsmith. And my first eggshells, I took it to him in Thanksgiving time, and we sold them between Christmas and New Year's. Those little carved eggshells, and they were $50 a piece, and I could make 4 of them an hour. I could carve 4 of those little buggers an hour and sell them for $200, and Dick got 100 of it, and I got 100 of it, and it's still $100 an hour to carve a stupid eggshell, and I just was flabbergasted. So, as luck would have it, I went after the marketplace in 2 specific time frames. One was I started in Thanksgiving time with Dick, and that's the best week of the year. The week between Thanksgiving and Christmas is the best marketing week of the whole year. And Park City is a hotbed of people that are there playing for Christmas and buying Christmas gifts. So I just could not have hit it any better. And Dick helped price it. I didn't know what the price should be. I just walked in the door with 24 of them, and he bought them all, right? Bam. He says, that's the most unique thing I've ever seen. He says, we'll put them up right here in the window, and we'll see how they do. Well, they sold really quick. And so he called a week later, and he said, I got to have some more of those, Lou. So I took another 24 out, and they sold just about as fast. But he says, the first one sold too quick. So what's wrong with our price? If it sells too quick and it's a want, then
Price is too low.
Price is too low. Absolutely right, Mel. So we raised the price, and they sold again anyway. So then you start playing with that price thing of thinking, well, I wonder what is too much. Where would the price point be on a carb, the kind of carb? And these were just turkey eggs.
When they don't sell.
And they don't sell, you know, okay, I probably reached the top end of the mark. And it was 149. They wouldn't sell 149, but they'd sell really quick at 100. So we sold for a while, and then as soon as the spring came and the snow went away, the sales stopped. And Dick says, well, that's how Park City is. He says, we do killer business as long as the snow's here, and then not much the rest of the time. And he says, what you ought to do, Lou, is do the Park City Art Show in August. And I didn't even know there was such a thing. And each of the stores in Park City controlled the space right in front of their store. So if they wanted an artist there that was from their store, they could make sure they were there. So I didn't have to have the jury process at all. Because of Dick, I got to just set up and go do. And I'd never done anything, no marketing effort like that whatsoever. And so my first show is a long story, and I won't get into that tonight because it brings up a lot of bad memories. It was really a rough day, rough couple of days, but I managed to pull it out enough to keep going. Then I went from Park City to Jackson Hole, and I talked about that last night too, and meeting Tom Mangelson, and neither one of us sold a stupid thing in Jackson Hole. Went to all that work and all that trouble and travel and setting up, and 0 sales. So in my beginning marketing efforts, I had as much failure and trouble as I think all of you do. It's kind of the price you pay as you begin to market yourself. You learn as you go. You learn as you do.
Buy your ticket and take your ride.
So was your experience similar to, Mel, when you first started?
Sure, we've had days that were financially fantastic, and we've had days where my darling wife spent more than we brought in. Uh,
Yeah.
it all works out.
Shows can be a little bit like that sometimes, can't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've had items in the show where on Saturday nobody would touch them. On Sunday, I made a, a little advertising sign, show special last day,
Bingo.
jacked the price up 3 times and discounted 1/3 off,
Hmm.
and they sold.
Gave them a special and they sold. And that way you learn. It's how you do it. Ron, can you remember when you first started doing demonstrating tools? Ron Snaberger's on with us tonight. Ron is one of our masters in our INE network program. Been a pal and friend of mine for years and years. Worked for American Woodworking Magazine and also sold tools for DeWalt at the woodworking shows, and that's where we met years ago. And Ron's going to do his one of his biggest seminar hangouts tomorrow with Dennis Litley. You want to tell everybody about that a little bit more, Ron, and remind everybody how to connect tomorrow?
Yeah, I sent out an invitation with his event page on it, and I think it's tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Eastern time, and I'll be on his show. Don't know what we're going to talk about. It's just going to be like a gab session, and there's 3 other guests on, so it's just like sitting around a coffee table and talking, so that's what it's going to be like.
Well, it's going to be an awful lot of fun for you, and Ron's had quite a bit of experience both with our INE network hangouts, but also was on Fox News with Brett Baer, and Arizona Low just had a show this last week, and he was on with her. So Ron's beginning to spread out and have even more exposure, which is the whole mechanism of marketing with the INE network. And when I presented last night, there's 2 segments of the economy we go after in our circle. There's the person that wants to learn how to do what we've learned how to do, and then there's the upscale patron that basically pays the bills. And once you begin to develop both of those databases and get some degree of exposure and recognition, then things start to happen like you dream they'll happen. When I'm at the table and having Jake Solomon brag about me in front of these 3 women today and their power of position in the economy here in Utah and Salt Lake, God, it's so much better to have someone else say that about you than when you have to say it about yourself. And that's what will happen tomorrow with Dennis, won't it?
Yeah, I think that's that's probably what's going to happen. When I saw the people who were going to be watching the show, I was amazed that, but that's that's the people that he has as his friends, and they watch each other's hangouts and support each other, and it's going to be an interesting hour.
Yes, very, very good. Congratulations to you. It's going to be really fun tomorrow. We'll all be there as we can, I think. So with your beginning to do your efforts to sell and demonstrate equipment, Ron, were you comfortable when you first started to try and develop an approach to sell something?
Selling tools at the woodworking shows was scary for me to start with because I've never done it before. And so one of the engineers had worked up kind of a sales script, a presentation, and for me to go by. What I had learned a long time back when I sold cars, if you don't make the words your own, they're not going to come out right. So I had to take his whole script, and basically every week for about 3 weeks after each show, I had to analyze what was going on, and I rewrote the script, and that's when things started to gel, and I started to do what I was hired to do. So it was scary at first, these people paid me a lot of money to stand there and sell product. If I didn't produce, I was going to be out on my ear. So I had to produce.
Now, you mentioned that you did a script, Ron. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by a script to sell? Explain that more.
Well, I had to cover all the points of the table saw that I was selling. So I had 10 to 12 minutes where you're going to hold the people's attention and to demonstrate the product and go over each vital piece of the saw. Okay. And so I had to develop what I was going to say about each piece and have it all fit together. And have it flow, that it just wasn't choppy, and it was a challenge.
So if a person does a show and for what they're selling they don't have a script, what's the odds of it working really well? In other words, if everybody that walks up to you or meets you, you tell them something new or something different, it's not likely to work as well in the selling process, is it?
No, because you have a group of people in front of you to start with, and they're all going to have questions, and so you got to try and cover all the bases and try to cover all their questions in your presentation before they even ask the questions. And that's what I did. I listened to what people were asking. And after each show, like if on a Friday I did a show, I wrote down all the questions, went back to the hotel. I incorporated those questions into the sales presentation so that the next day I could answer those questions. And after a few weeks, I had all the questions answered in my presentation before the people even got to ask them.
So you began to mold into what most salespeople call a pitch.
Yep.
A pitch is, when I meet someone, this is kind of what I generally tend to say in order to, don't you kind of guide the conversation to what you want it to, where you want it to be?
If you don't, it's going to go all over the place and people are going to interrupt you. And one of the lines I learned from one of the other vendors was, he told me, he said, Ron, this is what you got to do, because he listened to me and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. He said, here's what I use. He said, when people start asking you questions and they're ahead of the game, he said, just pause for a minute and say, okay, I'll tell you, you're on page 7, I'm on page 3. If you give me a minute, I'll catch up to you. And if I don't, ask me afterwards and I'll answer your question.
Oh, is that the wisest little bit of information? And see, Ron, it sounds so simple now after all your years of doing it, but the truth is most people start out trying to learn to sell something, don't have a clue how that works. Jack and I had a conversation last night. We talked on the phone for quite a long time, and he basically directed the traffic. He says, Lou, this is how I want this meeting to go tomorrow. This is where I want the meeting to end up. We're going to sit down together and have lunch, but the conversation's going to go this, and this. And I know my role and he knows his role. So we directed the conversation today. It wasn't just by accident. And I think most people don't do that. I don't think they bother to sit down and take the time to kind of think it through. Dennis has spent quite a bit of time. You've had several meetings with him, getting ready, getting familiar with each other, kind of knowing what's going on, and being familiar with each other, do you suspect that's going to help the quality of his program tomorrow?
Oh, absolutely, and I'll be on what they call the green room before the show with the other guests, so we get comfortable with each other, and so that all helps in how the show is presented and how it comes off. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, and improves the overall part of it. Well, in marketing, if you have, I like to call it a sequence. It's a presentation sequence that I go through. And I've talked about this one before many times. I've used ever since I started engraving car windows. You take that drill and you put a pattern on a truck window for somebody, it does some amazing things in the marketplace because it's highly visible. They're proud of it, they're thrilled with it, and they'll keep talking about you, and that then leads to another customer and another customer and another customer. And I used to do car shows. I literally fly to California or drive down with my setup and do Good Guys car shows. And I like Good Guys car shows because that's already in a higher social economic slice of the pie. You can't play in the fancy up your hot rod world without spending some money. It just costs a lot of money to fix up a car. And I found out pretty quick that since that's what I like to do with old cars, I know the numbers. I know what money it takes. And so I knew that that same crowd would be a little more interested in what I was engraving and put on car windows. And so I could literally up the level, up the ante of the kind of person that I was beginning to market to by the location and the position of my effort. So just like the business card, who you give it to, who you're able to give it to, the targeted marketing. I would do shows in Salt Lake, downtown Salt Lake, and not have 1/10 the reaction and the sales that I would have up at Park City or Sundance. It worked 10 times better. And so I tried Salt Lake because I thought it would be the same. I didn't understand the difference yet. But it doesn't take, if you'll think about it a little, just put some thought into where should I market. When Jose Valencia is not on tonight, but he may be listening in, but Jose and I spent some time talking about Scottsdale. As opposed to regular Arizona, Scottsdale has way more going on for it than regular Phoenix. And so as you begin to learn that and see that difference, you start having a whole nother level of potential.
Well, it's the dynamics of where people won't like to play that have money.
Yeah. Where are they? Where do you live, Mel?
I live in Asheville, North Carolina.
Is that a poor neighborhood or is that a fairly well-off neighborhood?
Depends on what section you're in.
Yeah, okay. I think most of us would say Asheville, North Carolina is quite well heeled.
It could be.
As a whole, yeah.
As a whole. Areas
yeah.
that are extremely well heeled.
How
Biltmore
good
Forest.
is, yeah, Biltmore's there. How good's the how good is the tourism?
Well, they hit the magazines at being the #1 coolest spot to be in this year.
Go figure. It's because Mel Joins is there, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Now that and a $1.05 will get you a cup of coffee in some places.
So as you start trying to figure out this difference, knowing the targeting and the targeting of your efforts will gradually improve your position in the economy. There's just no way around that. Lance, you're taking up 2 spots still. Can you kill one of your screens and let's see if we can't get Tammy back in here? somehow, son. I don't know what. I hate to kill it for you, because if I do, it paralyzes you. I did that once at Tam, and boy, we had a nightmare getting her back in. So take a look at how come you got two screens up, son. I don't know how.
I went out and shut my computer completely off and came back in, and it was still
And
there.
it's still there.
So it's something locked in the Hangout. There's
All
no
right,
way to get out of it.
let me see if I can't.
There it went. I don't know why.
All
Great.
right.
Thank you, whoever did that.
Lance, you have to log off.
I think I did it.
Lance, you have to log off whenever you
right-clicked it. I just right-clicked it, and that killed it. So now, Tam, if you can hear, there's Diane's back in, but if Tammy can hear, she can get in now and come in and participate, because we've been down this road for so many years with trying to help people understand the concepts we're talking about tonight. Because if you're not aware of what Ron was talking about scripting your efforts and trying to see how can I make it work better, instead of just putting it out, you begin to literally learn how to sell yourself, how to present yourself, what to say, and then maybe learn kind of what not to say. And one of my favorite tricks, and I still do it, I do it every chance I get, even though it's been a long time since I engraved car window now, but boy, what a great way to start. And every time I see a kid with a really nice car, at the gas station or at the post office or grocery store, wherever I am, I see a really nice car or truck, I compliment them. I've just gotten a habit where I know what those cars cost, and I know how dedicated and crazy most people are about them. I know a Corvette nut from one end of the world to the other. We have our own language. And so I always say, God, I pick out something specific. I don't like to say, wow, what a great truck. That's not what I say. I say, it's a great car, or I love the color, or the wheels are just awesome. I pick out something specific. And that specificness is what then begins to build that relationship, I think. And they will act and react more if you target something specific in the conversation. And I think it works the same way on Google+. When we're mixing here, I can tell an amateur on Google+ constantly because they barely say something. +1 is great and helps visibility to a little degree, but if you'll stop and put something in there and say something significant about what's being said up there, or the picture that's up, you like something unique about it, or something specific about it, then that draws them in. Now, when I would tell someone I like their car, I like the wheels, I like the tire, I like the color, then I always finish and say, it just needs one more thing. And that little line, that one little line in the car business was so deadly, because I've had people, they were literally walking away from me, and the second I said, it just needs one more thing, they'll turn and they can't resist interacting with what? It's the greatest question or comment. It leads to a question. It leads to a comment. They can't hardly deal with it. And it's so deadly, because then I say, well, I do custom automotive glass engraving. Here's my card. I'm over here at the booth and doing some engraving, or I'll invite them to the studio. I'm doing a engraving a car or a gun right now. You're welcome to come and see the kind of work I do. So you got to have a business card. It usually is great if you happen to have a sample of something that you're talking about, or a picture. Now I can just use my cell phone and swipe up a picture and say, this is me, this is what I do. And it's a presentation pitch, if you will. I always am uncomfortable with calling things a pitch in selling, because that's sales. I try and preach sharing rather than selling. I prefer selling. To me is a four-letter word, and most of us just hate that word. We don't like to be sold anything anymore.
You don't want to come across like a used car salesman.
Used car salesman, you don't want to sell a need. You're selling, sharing, and trading a want, something that people want, not something they need. And a salesperson has to talk somebody into that need no matter what.
I'm not going to stand on my head to make you a deal.
Yeah, that's just a whole other way to approach things. So if you're sharing what you have, it's a little bit easier to make that work. And our whole life is this need world, this want world, excuse me. Want world. We don't play with the things that people need. We stay with things that people want. And when I learned those kinds of tactics, I was taught by Jim Griffiths, who's, I think, easily the greatest salesman I ever was around in my life. Jim spent his life selling things. A little bit like Ron Schneeberger. They just have Ron sold all his life. And when you learn how to lay it down and you kind of come at it from a position that you're not trying to hustle somebody, you're trying to share what it is you have, and they like it or they don't like it. And then the second thing that happens all the time is the instant someone reacts to your first questions or your first comments, there's usually one instant that is so telling. If they start talking about how much is it, first words out of their mouth, whether you've described what you're doing or anything else, their first question is how much is it. You know instantly what part of the economy they're in. There's the top half of the economy and the bottom half of the economy. If someone brings up pricing first, very quickly, what part of the economy are they in? Always the bottom half. Bottom half don't have enough to pay for the wants. They've got trouble keeping up with the needs. And so they'll always price sensitive, extremely sensitive to price. Occasionally I've run into a wealthy person that will get to the price fairly quick, but not usually. Normally that's a really good rule of thumb to know who you're interacting with and kind of how this conversation's going to go based on what you're answering to my series of questions. I can direct the traffic in the conversation, and I will gradually pull the conversation over to where I want to play and what I want to talk about in order to try and pitch and present what I'm saying and what I'm selling. And it's a matter of learning to say, well, rather than just random and throw mud on the wall. One of my slides last night was we tend to go at it with just throwing mud on the wall. And that's not a good idea. What was it here? Who put that up? Something about Ed? He was typing something up and I couldn't read it on the screen.
Oh, that was me responding to Ed. He said I'd look cute standing on my head. Well, I let him know that was a line from a mobile home dealer in our area when I grew up. Where I grew up in Central California, is old Mac Lazarus, and his ad was, "I'll stand on my head to make you a deal."
Yeah. Well, I think that, was there any question, individual thing? I think last night was pretty explanatory. The idea that you're going to target a higher level of customer this year in your effort, and that you would literally start looking for some way to penetrate that crowd via a fundraiser.
Yeah, and upgrade your dress a little bit.
Okay, good point.
Because you don't want to approach that clientele blue jeans with an old greasy white t-shirt with the holes in it. It ain't going to go far.
It doesn't go over really well.
But,
yeah,
you know, good clean jeans or Levi's, black, whatever color you want to, you know, your pants are, but a good-looking sports shirt they're comfortable with.
And your presentation, what your table drapes are like,
And
how your booth is presented, everything, every element there affects that mixture with that potential upscale client. Denny Wainscott's our leader in the master in the gourd carving artwork area, and Denny's from Indiana. And Denny doesn't do the Salt Lake show because he's had a brain tumor and been fighting some really difficult health issues for a long time. But Denny did do the Salt Lake Park City Art Show for years. He'd drive clear out here, and then he'd do a sequence of 3 or 4 shows. But it was Sun Valley, Park City, and Sedona, Arizona. And all 3 of those are killer, expensive, high-end client customer potential. And then he got just deadly about doing his shows and selling his artwork, and the price range was extraordinarily high.
And be confident.
Yeah, he did the Santa Fe show was the first really significant Indian Native American artwork kind of focus for him, which is his thing. That's all his artwork mimics Native American artwork. And I told him on the phone, we were visiting about it, I said, Denny, this is the show to double your prices. And there was this long pause on the phone, and he says, what? And I says, yeah, Santa Fe is not your normal market for art, and I says, particularly for what you're doing, I think you should double your prices. He says, hell, Lou, that's going to make my top gourd's going to be $7,500. And I said, okay. And he was just not prepared for that. He says, I don't think that'll work. And I says, yeah, it will. The kind of customer you're after is the price is actually appealing to them, not discouraging. And I says, you got to realize that kind of potential. So he went down, did that show, and Randy Travis, the country western singer, walked up to his booth and bought 2 of them for $7,500 a piece. 2 of them. And blew Denny right off the damn planet. He was so freaked out, and then he took him back to his fancy killer motorhome was there, and they spent 2 or 3 hours together talking about Denny's artwork and his future and what's going on. And you got to know the reaction of the phone call afterward to me, because it was just, to begin with, going into it, he was convinced that it would not work. And then you just sit back and go, God, Jack Solomon usually won't buy something for less than 10 grand. He just won't. He doesn't bother. Nothing in his life is less than 10,000. So he's moved to a position where this crowd, this Oprah Winfrey bunch, when they cross your path, they can afford and pay for anything. Michael, you got your hand up, bud?
Yes, Dr. Lou. The last couple of years, I've donated KVIA Channel 6, Standard Broadcasting System, and it's been no good. There's been nothing there. Is that a bad way to try to donate?
Boy, it sure depends, the market, Mike, because sometimes I've done it. I've done lots of giving away, and it's one of my marketing tactics till you make something work. If they'll accept what you're donating, you really need to try and keep doing it, because you just don't know. You get the visibility, basically, for the cost of your time and the materials of producing whatever you give away. And if one thing doesn't work, then I usually will try something else. To me, entrepreneurism means that this is the target, this is what I'm after, and you're over here, but you can't quite figure out how to make it work to begin with. You keep it up, you'll eventually open that door. So I would encourage you to continue, like that or another venue of giving away. I showed you in the calendar last night that from January to May is when most organizations who are raising money do all their event marketing. It's really important to get into those wealthy people's checkbook early in the year, not the last half of the year. So all the really good stuff is happening right now. And so if you'll pay attention to that sequence and that cycle, and continue to make your efforts. Watch for anything in the magazines, usually not a newspaper and usually not a television ad. We have an art and soup festival in Salt Lake, and the restaurants get together and have a big feed. You buy a ticket to come, and the money goes to charity, and then artists bring their work and mix with this same crowd, and that's once a year. It'll be here in the spring, in March, I think, or April, in Salt Lake, and that's the only one I've ever seen that's advertised with a television ad. And so watch your magazines. Usually will have these kinds of, there's a lot of food and wine tasting festivals now that are charity oriented. They're raising money for something, and that's the crowd that can afford to come. Then you can usually count on that. The patrons of a festival like that are going to be in this upper end slice of the pie. Okay?
Thank you.
You betcha. All righty. Any other questions from anybody? Comments? Lance, have you done a fundraiser yet?
Well, a few years back, I used to do donations for the friends of the NRA, and I got myself known in my area. But what I really want to do is, and I haven't felt I was to that point until now, is I want to do a rifle or shotgun and get it to the national show and auction. Yeah. And that's coming up in a week, and I'm not ready for it. I got too many other things in the fire. But for next year, that's my plan as far as one of them. There'll be other things I'll figure out, but that's one I've just kind of always had a little goal. When I was to the point I felt right to be on a national scale, I wanted to do get a gun there.
Jose did the Colt Collectors Association do an extraordinary gun and presentation every year, and they sell it and raise raffle tickets for the Colt collectors, and that generally sells between $20,000 and $30,000. And they have 7 or 8 engravers, custom art people that work on that Colt collector's gun each year. And Jose called and he says, "What do you think? They've asked me to do the case for it, the presentation case." So someone made the case, and then Jose did the carving of the Colt collector's stuff on the lid of the box. But then Jose got to stand on the same stage with 7 other extraordinary engravers in the nation, which is just tremendous credibility for him at that very moment. So it's a little tough because I'm talking about things like Michael said, I tried and it didn't work, and I tried and it didn't work. And I hope you can somehow keep trying, because just because you haven't made it work before doesn't mean it won't work now. And yet you've got to be willing to try different things in different ways as well until something really does work. If it were easy to fish this crowd, this upper end crowd, think about it. If you're Jack Solomon or you're Oprah Winfrey, do you know how hard people push to get to them, to sell them something? It's got to probably, well, I've been with Jack enough. I know exactly what it's like. My job for 30 years has been to keep people away from him, not bring them to him. And I am very cautious of that. I learned really early on that it was just because I had access to him didn't mean that I could just flood the door with people that wanted favors or wanted to sell artwork. So he bought Greg Woodard's art, and he's never bought a Darwin Dower piece. I've tried gently for years to kind of move Darwin into his life, and he just doesn't prefer the kind of artwork that Darwin does. But met Tammy Severs. Tammy came over from Denver, was going to San Francisco to do a show, and I arranged for him to see Tammy's work. And again, the presentation was a little soft, and he didn't react in that situation either. And yet I've sat and watched him drop $50,000 or $100,000 on a piece of artwork. When I told his ceiling in his one room is hand inlaid marquetry from Italy, the whole ceiling of these 4-foot panels that he bought, and the ceiling in that room is $110,000 just for the ceiling. And when I told that to Mayor Becker's wife today, it was an audible gasp, because you don't often get in your life to see a ceiling that's $110,000 just for the ceiling in the room, not counting what's probably in the room. But it makes all the difference. You cross paths with somebody that really likes you and your work, and they will just almost in every way they can help your career grow. Jack has leaned under Greg Woodard's life. I mean, Greg Woodard's won the World Wood Carving Championships more times than any other one person. Since 1993, he's won it and won it and won it. In Ocean City, Maryland, the Ward Foundation Carving Show is considered the best wood carving show in the world. And he made the effort to go, produce a piece, and be there in the last week of April every year for years. And I tell often the stories of things that didn't work so well for him, but then he just kept doing, just kept trying, just struggling with it. And as long as you're aware that that's how it was for Mel, and that's how it is for Ron, that's how it's been for most of us. We don't, if I took the whole list of the shows and events that I've done 1,000 event marketing efforts in my career, at least 1,000. And if I showed you the beginnings of them were pretty rough and didn't do overly well. But because I kept learning by doing, I got a little better at it, got a little better at it, got a little better at it, and then eventually it just, everything changed. And I've sold both my work, my artwork, and I've sold what I've learned how to do. There's two categories here. In every event, there's a person that wants to learn how to do what you're doing, and then there's this patron. And you want to try and appeal and take advantage or sell to both of them.
You keep
And
retweaking your efforts.
go ahead. What, Mel?
You keep retweaking your efforts.
Well, isn't it like playing, hunting a rifle, shooting a gun, or playing a sport? The more you play, you should probably get a little better with it. As you're engraving and carving and you're practicing, you should get a little better at it.
One would hope so.
One would hope. It's going to be kind of discouraging if you don't.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the more you go, the more you learn. And the more you learn, the easier it becomes. And eventually, you'll be doing your setup, you'll be doing your sales, you're making your product, and it'll all flow, just like porn.
Pull your microphone down, Mel.
Oh, then maybe that'll work.
Wow, I can actually hear Mel now.
I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but we
Damn.
figured that out last night. You
We
gotta
gotta babysit them once in a while.
Well,
You know, you got to keep working at it, because
Yeah,
if
well.
you don't, you'll never improve. Like Edison found, what, 400 some odd ways not to make a light bulb?
actually, I think it was way more. At least he said it was way more than that. And he said, "I know all the things that won't work," which means
Exactly.
eventually, I'm going to get to what does work.
Yeah.
Well, you had a comment, Ron. Go for it.
Yeah, I did. When it comes to pricing your work, I remember this because it stuck real hard when we did the Pennsylvania German Festival for a few years. There was a guy there that made wooden toys, different sizes, and him and his partner also made kitchen utensils, wooden kitchen utensils. But we got talking about pricing, and he relayed this story to me about a wooden fire truck that he had made, and it was a nice size. And the guy came up to him and said, "Is that the price on your fire truck?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I really want to sell it." He said, "So I'll drop the price to X amount." And the guy turned around and walked away. So he went after him and said, "Well, you know," he said, I really cut the price down." He said, I'm a toy collector. And he said, if you think that little of your work that you will drop the price that fast, he said, I would pay you double for the original price to have that in my collection. But if you don't think that much of your work, I don't want it in my collection, and kept on walking.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That reminds me of Saturday. Saturday we were together. Tammy does the webinar, or the retreat over at the home studio once a month. And we got together and we spent the whole day together. We went to lunch, and I brought up James Goodman. Now, James Goodman's a Native American artist also. James and I have done so much together over the years. We went to a show in Phoenix, or in Palm Springs together, and he's so damn fun to be around. He's just very, very good artist and really strong with his Native American artwork. And Buffy said, I just heard a terrible story that happened to James. And she said he had a piece of artwork that was $4,400. And he was selling it at the Santa Fe art show. And the customer came up and he said 44. And they started writing him out a check for $44,000. And he stepped back and he says, "Oh, no, you got to miss. It's 4,400." And they did not buy the piece. They were ready to pay 44,000 for it, and he cut his head off. I'm going, if that doesn't pop you so hard, you're never going to approach it. I mean, you got to understand the kind of money that's in Sedona and the kind of money that's in Santa Fe, in Park City, and Aspen, and Jackson Hole, and Sun Valley, and Lake Tahoe. These are the resort places where people that have a lot of money go to play, and it's where they buy art.
And if they're writing a check, don't stop them.
Just shut your mouth, for crying out loud. I go, oh God, that'll haunt him the rest of his life.
It's like negotiating. Shut up.
Shut up. Let it happen.
Yeah, if nothing else, bite your tongue.
Oh, bite your tongue, man. Make it bleed if you have to.
Absolutely.
I said, I got to tell everybody. So I'm glad you made that comment and reminded me that. Oh, that made me nauseated at lunch Saturday. That would just haunt you. To know that they were willing to pay $44,000 and you priced it at $4,000. And
that almost reminds me of I sold cars after I couldn't work with metal anymore in the heavy end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because an ink pen or a hood was the heaviest thing I had to lift. Well, my first day, I arrive early, and I meet this guy on the lot. He's looking at a Suburban. And this is in the 90s. And a used Suburban, they had a $15,000 price tag on it. Well, my last brand new vehicle only cost $3,600. And that was, 1972.
Okay.
You see where my mindset was.
Yeah.
Why? And I looked at that price and thought, they want me to sell this vehicle to this guy for this price. Oh, well, let's do it. And I did.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And doesn't that change your thinking then?
Yeah, it did.
Start to realize that how Jack Solomon thinks is not how I think, nor is how most average people think. Jack has $80,000 a month to spend. It's his monthly allowance is $80 grand.
Poor guy.
And when he spends money, he has no bills. He can buy another. He bought another home in Sun City and Phoenix, and he just gets more money and done deal.
I know where there's a bridge I can sell him.
I listened to him negotiate with Laura Ingram, is trying to get his help to start. She's got a new project she's developing. I probably shouldn't say a whole lot about it yet. But I sit and listen to him talk about some ungodly numbers. as if it was used change and loose change. And it's kind of been interesting for me over the years to be that close to him, because I get to see a lot on the inside of his life now. But as I first met him, that first little while of my interaction with him was really unusual, and I busted my butt to try and stay in his life and keep him happy and do things. I did a lot of free stuff for him. The one lady today, she says, how are you and Jack somewhat associated? And I says, well, I do his thank yous. A well-off person has a lot of thank yous in their life, and what I did was offer to engrave something that he could then give away to people. And I did that for free for a long, long time. And on occasion, I will still do it for free, because you got to keep the trade in mind, the trade of who's getting what, who's being given what, and how does all this kind of stuff work. If you've not played this upper end upscale game, you've got to learn. You have to just begin to think that, well, their budget is completely different from mine. They have every number in their life has 3 more zeros behind it than what we experienced. And that's pretty hard at times to kind of begin to make that trade and make it actually work. Well, anybody got another comment or anything? We couldn't ever get Diane and Tammy back in tonight. I don't know what happened. I wish we could have had their participation too. The next show series, we have 4 more sessions, and please don't miss them now. You get started into this, it's always our own thinking is the problem. In marketing, we have an opinion and an attitude about how we do things. And if you come at your business from the thinking of a consumer, you'll be completely wrong. You're just 180 degrees orientation of what you ought to be. And you've got to get your thinking over here on the trading side of the table of the producer. And then begin to watch for those who are succeeding around you and try and learn from them. Ron made such an excellent comment tonight when someone told him, this is how I handle lots of questions. Now, if you forget what Ron shared with you tonight, you will have really walked past an absolute diamond in the rough. That kind of counsel, this is just worth a fortune, because it comes from the voice of experience. This is how I handle it. And twice tonight, I told you of what you ought to do moment in my life, and Ron used that same phrase, didn't he? That guy told me, you know, Ron, what you ought to do is handle it this way. Now, when a what you ought to do comment comes from somebody of experience, that's the time to pay attention. There's always gold at the end of that little comment. Always. Every time I follow it through, someone would say, you know, Doc, you're handling this way. What you ought to do is try it this way. And bingo. Every time I could bend my brain enough to try and do it the way it was being suggested to me, things improve. From the very first show, when I did that little art show in Park City that summer, I had an absolute catastrophe the first couple hours of the show. And the guy next to me came over and he says, and the lady had dropped her purse in my display and broke everything I had up. Just wiped a third of my inventory out in one stroke, and I could have just died. And he came over and he says, you know, Doc, I've been doing art shows like this for 15 years. He says, what you ought to do is stay with this. He said, I've never seen anything so unique. And he says, let me help you clean up your mess and get you set up again and start doing. Come at it a little differently. He says, you're an amateur, and it will help if you do it more this way. And I says, is it that obvious? And he says, yeah, I've done a lot of shows, a lot of outdoor events. I know how to handle this circumstance a little better. But it was that what you ought to do moment. Rethink things and come back at it from another direction.
And smile.
Yeah, oh, smile. Try.
Yep.
Try to smile.
Don't get angry over what happens or what doesn't happen, what you think ought to happen that doesn't make it. Just have fun.
Yeah, play. I pulled a quote off of the stream today that said that the greatest form of play is the greatest form of imagination. Isn't that what it was, that Edison quote? Everybody see that? Was the greatest form of creative imagination is playing. So I try and keep it that way too. That's Mel joins council for the night, right? All right. I think we've hit it hard, and we've gotten a lot accomplished.
And we're still broadcasting.
And we're still broadcasting. So I'm going to shut the broadcast down. We'll see you next week in session 2 of Upscale Marketing. All righty?